All right, Palm Sunday. And I want to talk to you about the king we all really wanted. The king we all really wanted. And if you saw Wednesday, we talked a little bit about Rehoboam, King Rehoboam. We're in 1 Kings 12. 1 Kings 12. I want to tell you a little bit. As you're turning, I'll talk to you and tell you nothing's been finalized with the building I told you about last week. As soon as I hear, I will let you know. Okay? So I just wanted to say that. 1 Kings 12. Let's look at verse 1. First of all, we should say that Rehoboam is King Solomon's son, and King Solomon is King David's son. Right? Okay. And, if you didn't study all the kings, it'll make sense in a minute, so it's all right. But it was kind of assumed that Rehoboam would take over as king of Israel, although it had been prophesied over Jeroboam, who was not in the line of David, but he was one of the mighty men that served under Solomon, right? And so when it all came out, Jeroboam left. Because you're either going to be king or you're going to get killed because they think you're going to try to be king, right? So he left, right? And so this is what it says in 1 Kings 12:1. Rehoboam went to Shechem, for all of Israel had gone there to make him king. So it happened when Jeroboam, who was the one that was prophesied that he would get 10 of the tribes, but it hasn't happened yet, okay? When Jeroboam heard it, he was still in Egypt. He had fled because of the presence of King Solomon, that they sent and called him. Now think about this. This guy got a prophecy from a prophet saying that the kingdom of Israel is going to be split. You'll get 10 tribes, and the other 2 will go, another way. It'll be divided. He's got a pretty good prophecy going on. But I want you to see that he's patient. I'm not saying that he was a great man, because he ended up leading them into idol worship when he did have his chance, okay? But in the beginning, he was patient. So he did come, and we're in verse 3 now. They sent and called Jeroboam, and the whole assembly of Israel came and spoke to Rehoboam, saying, and this, when they say this, they're speaking of Solomon. Now, how many of you remember the reason God took them out of Israel? Out of Israel. They are Israel. Took them out of Egypt. What were they crying out because of? The oppression. Their burden was heavy. Egypt had the king of, the Pharaoh had oppressed them and oppressed them and oppressed them, made it harder and harder and harder on them, right? Now look at what they say about Solomon in his latter days, right? Here it is. They say to Solomon's son, Rehoboam, your father made our yoke heavy. Now, therefore, lighten the burdensome service of your father and his heavy yoke which he put on us, and we'll serve you. A king of Israel was treating them like they're in Egypt again. Isn't it good that Jesus' dad is not a human? That's the only way he escaped this mess. Human beings, since the fall, all of the line of Adam, have issues. That's why we can't save ourselves. We have to have a Savior whose dad is not of human descent. Because it doesn't matter how good you are, there's something in you that can't dwell in heaven. You have unrighteousness in you, right? Even Solomon. He's the wisest king ever that we read about, right? And you think and you read about Solomon, talk about all the great building projects and all the people that came to see all the things he did. And they're not telling you the whole time he's oppressing the people and taxing them so he can get it done. Right? But he is. Okay. What do they say? Take off the heavy yoke and we will serve you. So Rehoboam told him, he said, depart for 3 days and then come back to me. Now understand, Jeroboam had that prophecy that the king would be divided, he'd get 10 of the tribes. He's not going around saying, hey, y'all just need to throw him out. He's just like his dad, make me king. So you see the wisdom in it. He's honestly, these guys at least in the outset are trying to let God be God and let what will happen happen, right? Both of them, okay? Rehoboam's young. He's somewhat young. And so, verse 6, King Rehoboam consulted the elders who stood before his father, Solomon, while he still lived. And he said, how do you guys advise me to answer these people? They spoke to him saying, if you will be a servant to these people today and serve them, answer them, and speak good words, they'll be your servants forever. And he said, well, I don't know if I'm going to believe that or not. So he went, and then he counseled with the young men that were his age that he grew up with. They told him the opposite. Man, you need to get this under your feet. You need to get this under your feet. You need to tell him if he put a burden on you, wait till you see the one I'm going to put on you. You need to double down on him. Which wisdom do you think he took? Well, only one was wisdom. He ended up going with the young people's, right? And verse 11, you can kind of see there kind of the detail of what they told him to say and what he ended up saying. And now, whereas my father put a heavy yoke on you, I'll add to your yoke. My father chastised you with whips, I'll chastise you with scourges. All right, that's what they counseled him to say. So on the third day, Jeroboam and the assembly, who had been waiting to hear his reply, showed up, just like they said they would. Okay? And that's what he told them. So in verse 16 there's a quote, and that's what they ended up saying when he told them what he told them. Verse 16, now when all of Israel saw that the king did not listen to them, the people answered the king saying this, what share have we in David? We have no inheritance in the son of Jesse. That's David's dad, right? To your tents, O Israel. In other words, go back home. There's no reason to be in Shechem. We're not doing anything here today. We're not crowning anybody king, right? And then they looked at him, Rehoboam, and they said, now see to your own house, O David. Now Rehoboam descended of David because David, Solomon, Rehoboam. See to your own house. See, a king cannot function without a kingdom. I think he missed that, right? Like, you can't go out to battle unless you have an army. You can't build buildings unless you have a workforce. Right? You can't put guards on the walls around the city unless you have guards. King can't do anything by himself. And this is what they're telling him. Okay, well, you think that's how it works? Fine. See to your own house. What's bad about this? It's prophesied that the Savior will come and sit on David's throne. Right? So you have the children of God, the children of Israel, saying they have no inheritance in the house that the Savior comes from. So verse 19 tells us this. So, and this is written as of this time, but it pretty much persevered in one way or the other. So Israel has been in rebellion against the house of David to this day. Now, the house of David is the house of Jesus. So they were in rebellion against the house or the tribe that the Savior would come from.